Welcome to Cooking to Feast. Today we're going to be looking at, is it possible to do a quick cook on pork shoulder barbecue? Typically, a pork shoulder can take quite a long time, perhaps even up to 13 to 18 hours depending on the size of it, especially if you're cooking at a lower temperature like 225. Today's experiment, I'm going to take a pork shoulder and cut it into 3 smaller parts and see what the outcome is. The hope is cooking it alongside these ribs and chuck roast, we'll be able to have a product that is done approximately the same amount of time. So here we have an overhead shot of the ribs, along with the 3 arrows pointing to the cut up pork shoulder. And at the bottom, you'll see the chuck roast, which we're trying to do a pseudo burn ends today. And so right now we are about 4 hours into the cooking process. I didn't come up with the idea to start filming this until after I noticed on the pit that it was starting to get a gray color. But you'll see the nice red color and the smoke building up on the outside of each of the pieces of the meat. After the internal temperature reached about 155, I decided to wrap them along with the ribs to finish them off and make them tender. The smoker I'm using is the Weber Smoky Mountain, and I'm using a mixture of the charcoal for the main heating source, along with hickory chips to provide the flavor for the ribs, pork, and beef today. About 1 hour later, we're going to take another look at it here. The ribs themselves are done now. You'll see a little bit of pullback, not as much as I expected, but they are very tender at this point, and the color on the outside is very good. There's a nice exterior bark, and so all we're going to do is add a little barbecue sauce to it, and then try to thicken it up a little bit by putting it back on to the pit and letting the smoke evaporate some of the moisture out of the sauce. As far as the other items on here, the pork shoulder and the beef that we have going, I expect this to take anywhere from about another hour to 2 at most, as they are wrapped now and they are coming up to temperature. So with this shot here, we'll see the finished ribs now that the sauce is set up. I'm really happy with the way they came out. Besides just not getting as much pullback as I want, I really like the color. Look how red these are. Look at the nice little char marks on it. I love cooking with charcoal on ribs. It's not the only thing. I also have a pellet smoker as well, but when it comes to ribs, I really enjoy the taste of charcoal. And so you'll see here we have the ribs inside, and just the red is really coming out. And I know maybe that doesn't affect the taste as much, but visually I love seeing that, and it makes me feel like I did a good job. Now take a look at this crosscut. This is an example of what a good rib looks like. You'll see the smoke penetration in there, and then on the close-up shot here, you'll see the nice rendering down of all the fat inside of it. This is a good rib. So let's go and take a look back at our other cuts of meat today. We've been about a little under 7 hours at this point, and now we're going to check the internal temperatures of the pork shoulder that have been cut in thirds and our chuck roast. So starting with the chuck roast, we're at 211. It's just slightly higher than the ideal temperature. And then on our pork shoulders, we have a mixture between 209 and 205. Honestly, we probably could have pulled these about 5 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes earlier than this, but I'm not too worried about it with the pork, as this should break down very easily and is what we're looking for. So here we have our finished chuck roast. We do have some smoke on the outside. I used a very light seasoning rub. This video here isn't really a tutorial on like the rubs and actually how to cook each of these pieces of meat. We're just focusing completely on cook times and being able to cook multiple types of meats on the smoker. But here you'll see I've chopped it up and you get this really good pink smoke ring effect on here. And it's not too tender to cut and keep its shape, so that's good. So we didn't go too much over the ideal temperature. So we've covered them in sauce, and as these are the pseudo burn ends, we're going to glaze them back up and put them on the pit. With this, we're looking to do maybe another 15 to 30 minutes just to have them set up a little bit. And here we have the reveal. They look just a little bit more set up at this point. And I've tried one, and they're pretty good at this point. So we're going to pull them off of here. We've got them on our cutting board. And so we have these ready to go along with the ribs at this point. There's been about an hour difference between the two, plus another 30 to 45 minutes of rest for the pork shoulder. So how did we do on the pork shoulder? I think it came out fantastically. Look at this, 4 hours of direct smoke on here, and this is the crust we're getting. And then another less than 3 hours to wrap them and make them tender. So this is by far faster than a whole pork shoulder. And you'll see each one of them looks amazing at this point, at least for me. But how tender are they? So you'll see here, we're just taking the shoulder bone completely out of here. The wrapping effect is just completely tenderized them down. All the connective tissue is completely gone. So within 7 hours of this, and then a rest period, we have completely disintegrated the meat here. And the added benefit, which I'm very excited about, is that we're going to have a lot more surface area for actual bark on this. My biggest issue with a whole pork shoulder is that you get a great crust on the outside, or a great bark, but that doesn't usually translate to the insides of it. And so you'll see here, there's all sorts of little bits of the outside bark mixed into here. You are going to get a much heavier smoky flavor within your pork, especially with all those little bits chopped up into there. This method here is especially for anyone who loves bark. This is for the bark lover. I'm sold on it, and it's not even because of the time factor. I would spend 13 hours to get this kind of product, but I don't have to. It is super tender, it's super moist, and the flavor, I have to say this is one of the best pulled porks I've ever made. So to definitively answer our question on a quick cook barbecue, can you smoke a pork shoulder and pair it along with two meats like a chuck roast and ribs that don't take nearly as long? The answer is absolutely. So feel free to give this experiment a try on your own. And again, this is Cooking to Feast.